Hi, welcome to another Dolphin Financial Radio show. I'm Dan Wendell, and today's topic we're going to be talking about I bonds, Series I savings bonds. Now, why are we going to talk about this? Aren't bonds boring? And what is an I series savings bond? We're going to get through all that today because it's a hot topic. And the I stands for inflation, and that's what everyone's talking about now. So let's bring in some sidekicks today. We got the famous co-host Tony Shore, and we also have Chris Kuntz, another Dolphin Financial representative. Here we go. Welcome to the show, guys. Tony, we're talking about I bonds today.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
For the listeners on their podcast listening software. We are all together. Last time we were together, you guys heard us. We were in California. For the viewers, they get to see. We're all on the screen together yet again. And I chose to talk about I bonds today. And you guys still showed up. So this is going to be great.
Wow. I bonds. I just think internet. When I hear something, I think iPhone. I think are they Apple bonds from Apple?
Are those the bonds that pay interest?
I for interest?
Oh, okay.
No, you know what the I stands for? Stands for inflation.
Really?
Series I, yes. Yes.
So this is an inflation phone? I don't understand.
Yeah, what does the I in the iPhone stand for? Internet? We don't know.
I don't know.
You guys are the ones that own the Apple products, not me. You should be telling me.
Yeah, I don't know.
That is a good question.
Yeah, see, This is, if anyone knows, if a listener or a viewer is aware of what the I stands for in the iPhone, please let us know. I'm going to go with internet. Tony's going with inflation. Chris is going with interest. No, so I bonds. Let's talk about these, Tony. You don't know what they are. You've never heard of them?
I had really, I've heard the term I bond actually just thrown out there, maybe from you, a conversation with you, but I have no idea what an I bond is. I'll be honest. I just assumed interstate bond or internet bond. I didn't know.
Are there any I bonds in Hawaii? Because there's no interstates. Is it? Okay. An I bond is a savings bond that earns interest based on combining a fixed rate and an inflation rate. Yes.
So those I bonds have to be doing pretty good right now.
What are they doing right now? What would you guess, Tony?
Well, I'm glad you guys asked me that question because from everything I've seen, I keep hearing, and from folks like yourselves, financial services professionals, say bonds have been in the dumps for the last 5-10 years. They've been terrible. So people are like, bonds are terrible. You're not going to make any money in bonds. So this bond must be different than your average bond. That's what I'm getting. And if it's tied to inflation, if they go up with inflation, I would hope they're worth about between 5 and 7 or 8% right now because inflation's going through the roof.
Well, typically what happens, Chris, when interest rates go up, bonds don't do so good, right?
That is correct.
Right. But this is not interest rates. It's inflation rates.
Huh.
Let's look at what the current rate is for these I bonds. Look at this.
Right.
For the viewers, I'll read it because, they'll see it at the bottom of the screen, but the listeners don't know what we're talking about. Current composite interest rate, 7.12%. That's annual. 7.12% if you own an I bond right now. If you buy an I bond right now, that's what you're going to get.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
It sounds too good to be true.
How long does that last for?
I'll see.
How long does that last?
The cynic has arrived.
Yeah, it sounds too good to be true to me.
Right? This is kind of what, and then that's why we're talking about it, because you see all the articles. You Google I bonds right now, you're going to see a ton of articles. Oh, this is the greatest thing, but they've been around forever. No one's talking about them, right? But now we're talking about them because of inflation. Let's talk about now. The geek in me is going to come out. You guys have to stop me. Tony loves math. Tony loves math.
No, I was told there would be no math. Come on.
Here's the math, because you asked, Tony. You asked.
Sure.
Composite rate. Notice I said composite rate. It's made up of a formula. Look at that formula. Oh, boy. Fixed
Wait,
rate.
there's stuff in parentheses. I'm out.
Right.
I'm out.
Remember, what is it? Chris, you got some kids doing math right now. Was it
Right.
my dear Aunt Sally? Is that what you do?
Yeah.
Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.
Oh my gosh.
Is that what you learned in school? You guys are from the Midwest. Is that what you guys learned? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.
I don't remember.
You don't know?
I don't.
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, Aunt Sally, addition, subtraction. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. That's the way I learned it.
Yeah, I didn't have an acronym.
No?
Nope.
You just
Nope.
know parentheses first?
I just do.
Never heard that. And I don't have an Aunt Sally, so I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll sum it up at the end. Look at this. 7.2% is what the formula is. But what they do is they take the fixed rate of an I bond and they add an inflation factor. What is the fixed rate currently, you ask? If you buy a treasury bond, I bond at 30 years, this is a 30-year bond, 0. That's the interest rate you get. A fixed rate of 0 plus interest associated with inflation. What do you think of that?
So the fixed rate that they use right now is 0?
Is 0.
So there is no fixed rate they use. So they're just using their inflation rate then.
Right. So the way I think the bond works is essentially they're saying it's like a savings account that keeps up with inflation, because you're going to deposit your money into this bond and you're going to collect interest based on inflation. So if you put, I think the max you can put into this is like $10,000. Is that right?
That's right. That's actually 15. We'll get to that in a moment, but yes.
Okay. Whatever you deposit into it, that value, the way I look at it, is going to be able to purchase the same amount of goods however far in the future you choose to pull it out. Because if it's keeping up with inflation, that $10,000 today can buy, a bucket of goods. And 15 years from now, if you get just inflation and no extra interest on top of that, it's going to buy the same bucket of goods because everything's going to go up by that much in price.
That's the idea. Is it's designed to keep up with inflation. But the 30-year fixed rate is 0. So if you're buying this bond, you're guaranteeing that the fixed rate you're getting, if you buy it today, and they price these every 6 months. You buy it today, you're getting 0. Plus the inflation, if there is any. Currently, and this is CPIU. CPIU is the inflation rate they use. The current CPIU is 3.56 for the 6-month period. So you double that for the year. And that's why you get 7.12. That's what you get for the 6-month period, annualized. Then they reprice it. So you're not going to get that forever. So if you buy an I bond today, you'll get you're getting 7%. But that's only for the next 6 months. What are you going to get after that? We don't know. What we do know is you're guaranteed to get 0 for the next 30 years if inflation doesn't factor in. By the way, CPIU, Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers. So each May and each November, they reprice these. They say, when did you buy it? Oh, I bought it in February of 2022 at 0. I locked in that 0% for 30 years. But I was getting 7.2% because of inflation. Then May of 2022, they reprice it. And then you're going to have a new inflation rate. What's it going to be? We don't know. So do
you have to leave money in there for 30 years? I mean, what's that term? I need to know that.
I have that.
How liquid is it? How liquid is it is what I'm asking.
Here's the liquidity. 30-year bond. Okay. So you're guaranteed the 0. You could guaranteed to be able to own this for 30 years at 0%. Now, it wasn't always 0%. If you bought one in 1998, I think the rate is 3%. I have that somewhere. You can look it up. But you bought it in 30 years ago, you might be getting 3% fixed plus inflation. So instead of getting 7% right now, you're getting 10. if you happen to own a bond from years ago, right?
Mm.
So 30-year bonds, but you don't have to hold it for 30 years. You have to hold it for 1 year. You can't sell it for a whole year. Okay, so you can't buy this for 6 months and sell it. Now, if you sell it within 5 years, you lose 3 months interest. So it's like a CD.
So really, you wanna leave it alone for 5 years to really make your money and get everything you can out of it, is what you're saying.
No. Here's why. Let's imagine you buy this, Tony, today. All right.
Okay.
Now, Chris, let's imagine Chris does it because he's the one that actually can buy one of these things.
Sure. Sure.
So Chris buys a 30-year I bond. They say, here you go. He puts 10,000 down. Here you go. And I think you can buy them for $25 increments. But he puts 10,000 down. They say, we're going to give you 0% for the next 30 years. Thank you very much. And this is the government, by the way. These are treasury bonds.
Right.
So the government, you're giving the government money there, and they're going to guarantee they're going to give you nothing for the next 30 years, but plus inflation. So Chris is like, haha, I read an article. I saw that video that Dan and Tony and Chris did. I'm buying this, or in Chris's case,
inflation's going crazy.
Inflation's going crazy, right? He's excited about it. How do you think about that, Chris? 7.12%. You excited?
I mean, for a bond, I'm very excited for that interest rate.
Government backed, federal government, USA, right? Then 6 months, down the road, or 3 months down the road, they reprice it. And they say inflation is actually negative. We had negative inflation, or inflation was 0. What happens then? So for the next 6 months, you're getting 0. You're getting the guaranteed rate plus inflation of 0. Now, if the inflation is negative, which could happen, right? Deflation, they don't give you negative. You don't owe the government money. They know you're getting hit with, they think, oh, you're making money by you just owning the US dollar, a strong dollar.
Right.
So you actually don't have any interest. So then what do? If you sell, at that point, you lose your interest that you were getting 7.12. So what are you going to do, Chris? If I said, all right, you got 7.12, now interest rates are 0 because inflation's 0. What are you going to do then?
I mean, I'm probably going to sell.
Then you have to give back 3 months of your interest that you made at 7.12%. That stinks. But if you just bought it this year, you can't sell it. You have to hold it for a whole year.
For 1 year.
So worst case scenario, Tony, you buy a bond now. We're talking early 2022.
Yep.
They give you 7.12%. By the way, you buy it on the last day and you get the interest for that time, right? But you can't sell it for a year. So the interest rates go to 0, say. Now what? Now you're stuck for 6 months at 0.
Mm-hmm.
But that's worst case scenario. 7.12% for 6 months and then 0 for the next 6. You're still getting over 3%.
Yeah. And nobody has a crystal ball, but I think a lot of people are saying, the talking heads out there on the financial networks are saying, interest rates or inflation is probably here to stay for a little bit. So
right now we're in January of 2022. Right now you're saying, hey, this is not bad. I get 7.12% interest. Okay, until April. And then in May, they're repriced. You're thinking inflation is going to be higher this quarter, this next 6 months, the beginning of the year, and May is going to come around. They're going to say, you know what? Inflation's actually higher than 3.56% over this time. So you might even get more than 7.12 for the remainder of 2022. It's not a bad deal.
The other thing I like about this investment, in terms of just bonds in general, is you think about not just the inflation that we're currently facing, but also rising interest rates. And as we talked about, bonds suffer when interest rates go up because if you understand a bond, the way they're priced is based on what interest rate they're fixed in and paying. So when interest rates go up, those lower interest paying bonds have to lower their price or go down in value in order to pay a competitive rate compared to new issued bonds. So what we're looking at here is a bond that isn't fluctuating downward as interest rates go up. So you're able to capture an interest rate based on inflation, which is high right now, hold it for whatever period we're going through high inflation. And then when you want to sell it, I mean, you're not going to get more than what you put into it back besides interest, but you're going to get your money back that you put into it plus any interest you earned, and minus 3 months if you sell it before 5 years. But that is a secure feeling, knowing that you don't have to worry about what the interest rate market is doing right now.
Yeah, your principal protected, but yet you don't have the downside that regular bonds have had, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
But
right.
what about taxes with an I bond? How does that? I know I brought
You had to bring it up, but
I used
Tony,
the T word.
I know you, Tony. I know you. That's why I'm prepared. Let's talk about it. Very, very interesting way this is taxed. The owner pays the tax. So if you buy one for your son, who's a minor, you'd be the owner, say, and you say, I'm buying it for you. You get taxed. The owner does. But the owner can be a minor. The owner can be an entity or your cousin, right? So they get the taxes associated with it. They pay federal tax on this, but not state and not local. I'm talking to you, Californians.
Yeah.
You can buy one of these, no state or local tax on an I bond. And it's deferrable. So yeah, you're making 7.12% this year, let's say. You don't want to pay taxes on it? Don't. You can if you want to pay every year, like a bank CD, right? You get a 1099. You don't have a choice. Bank's sending you the 1099. Here, you pay taxes when you take that interest. So you can say, yeah, give it to me. I'll pay the taxes this year. Or you can say, I'm holding out. Let's defer that. Let it roll. And then 10 years, 20, 30 years down the line, you say, all right, time to pay the taxes. And that's what a lot of people do. They just defer it. So you get the compounding interest. Not bad. And look at that last point, education tax exclusion. That sounds interesting.
So you can use it like a 529, where if you pull it out to pay for your kid's college or your grandkids' college, you don't have to pay taxes on it. Am I reading that right?
Doesn't that sound wonderful? Yeah,
it does.
It's just like it's the IRS exclusion for education. There's different ways you can use other money to pay for student, it's qualified education expenses. You can't just, go to Tony's Pizza Buffet school and, write it off. But if the rules, but this qualifies for that. So, hey, if you want to use an I bond that you've held for 20 years, making decent interest because inflation's been high, and you want to use it to pay for education expense that's qualified, no taxes to the government. Yes, I'm loving this. I'm starting to say, why don't I own these?
Well, I think it's interesting, again, coming back to the interest thing you were talking about and being able to defer the interest and allow for compounding. That, again, is unique to these bonds. Typically, the way a bond pays interest is based on what its value was when it was issued. Bonds typically are issued at $1,000 par value, and they pay interest that they declare based on that $1,000. Here, every time they reprice the inflation interest that they're paying on the bond, they also add in the interest from the previous 6 months and pay interest on top of that. Well, that is unique to this type of bond.
Yeah, that's that formula in there has got the plus. Now, right now it's 0%, but who knows? I think that the 0% scares a lot of people. Why would I ever buy a bond for 0%? You could buy a German bond and lose money for negative.
Yeah, true.
Lose money, right? But people do it for safety. This is great. You can buy it and you're guaranteed to never lose money on it. You're not saying that you're going to make money, but the thing that I think people are getting confused with is they think they can buy a bond, get 7.7% for 30 years. That's not how it works. Every 6 months, you can go right back down to zero, right?
I mean, and realistically, if you think in terms of that period, a 30-year inflation rate, I want to say we've averaged around like 3%.
That's
Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you could defer that. You're getting a 3% compounding over time. That's not bad. That's not a bad option, especially for retirees or people, you know, that have some spare cash sitting on the side that they're not sure what to do with. They're not getting that at the bank. So why not throw it into an iBond?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, it depends on where, you know, things like other safe money or, you know, principal protected options are at. I suppose you'd compare it to that. You'd compare it to a CD, a certificate of deposit, or you'd compare it to a fixed indexed annuity where principal protected type options for your money, especially as you get older or in retirement, right? So if you're comparing it to that, this sounds a lot better than CDs, at least while interest rates are crazy low.
Right. And a CD is going to give you a higher guaranteed rate. All right. We're going to give you, well, what are they going to give you?
Well,
we're going to give you 1.5% for 3 years, right? That's better than what this treasury
higher
bond
than
is
zero.
offering you. It's a lot higher than zero, but they're not giving you any inflation. In fact, if interest rates go up, they're not going to say, hey, you know what? Interest rates are going up. Well, we're going to give you more. They're going to say, no, you have to surrender this and give up the interest. And
if you've got 7% actual inflation happening, which I'm talking about actual, not the consumer price index. I'm talking about actual inflation with healthcare and energy costs going up and cost of goods and groceries going up. If you have your money in a CD, that is not keeping up with inflation.
That's right.
Yeah. And so anything based on inflation, like you were saying, Chris, having a tool like this, a financial vehicle that is says it will definitely keep up with inflation because that's what it based your interest payments on. I mean, that is appealing.
I agree. I think it's very appealing. How do you get them? That's the question. People say, well, you know, you used to go to the bank and get a bond, right? I still have bonds. I still have bonds from the 80s. They're making interest. I'm not going to cash them in until they come due, but more the 90s now. Actually, wow, geez, that went quick. 90s. I still have bonds, but these you have to get online. You can't go to the bank and get a bond, a treasury bond like an iBond. You have to go to Treasury Direct, which is the website that the U.S. Treasury does, and you can only buy up to $10,000 worth per calendar year. So, you know, you might be saying, wow, I'll take 7%. Let me put 100 grand in there right now. No, 10%, 10,000. However, because that's what you said, Chris, you could say 10,000 was the max, but it's not. You can also do this on your tax return. You know how you get the tax return? Do you want to just contribute to the voting? Do you want to contribute money to the national voting thing? You know how that you can donate money? You can fill out an extra form and say, I want $5K worth, up to $5K worth of Treasury iBonds while you do your taxes. Give me the, instead of giving me the tax return, give me an iBonds. So, and you could do that for up to 5, and that's the paper-based way versus the Treasury Direct, which is 10K. So if you do both, you can actually get 15K worth.
So you think you can do both?
You can do both. Now, do you want to do both? Some people might say, yeah, 15K, let's do it. Let's do it right now. In fact, I want to do it. My wife's going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy it for my son, so he's going to own some. And there we go. Now I got 45,000 in iBonds. All of a sudden, it's like,
so it's per individual, not family.
Right. So do it. Right. Let's do it.
Right. Wow. Interesting. I'm surprised I haven't heard more about these. Of course, now it's popping up because of the reason we haven't is we haven't had inflation in how long? I mean, it's been.
Well, Chris will tell you too. Now that we've talked about it, the Google machines have heard us, and we're going to see this on our phones for the next 2 weeks.
When Dan Wendell talks, when Dan Wendell speaks, now that Dan's talked about it online and on his show, it's going to be, the interwebs will light up on this one.
Well, it's always like as soon as Tony mentions it in a party, then you know it's peaked. He's like, well, I'm thinking about buying Bitcoin, and all of a sudden the thing drops to, by 75% in the day.
Yes, I'm old. So when somebody over the age of 50 typically says, hey, that sounds like a great idea, it's usually passé. In a couple of years, I might look into this cryptocurrency thing.
But I will say the younger crowd's not talking about this because A, they don't know about it. It would require reading, right? Two, they don't know what inflation is. Right.
Well, they don't care about principal protection either because they have their time horizon is different, right? I mean, you're the one that taught me that, Dan, is, the reason you don't care about this if you're in your 30s or 40s even probably because you're going to want to write it out. You want the bigger returns. You're willing to take the risk because you have time on your side.
But I like the idea that it's 10K because I could see anybody saying, you know what, that's going to be my emergency fund.
Yeah.
That's my emergency fund. Why not put the emergency fund in an I bond? Now, granted, true emergency, you can't sell it for a year. So that's the first hurdle. But after that, within 5 years, so you have to lose 3 months of interest. Big deal.
Yeah.
It's an emergency. It's
and
raining.
that first year, you just need to be real careful.
Right. So you don't put your entire emergency, but you start laddering these things.
To have an emergency.
Every year you ladder them.
I mean, as a strategy, that's what I keep thinking too, is if you're limited to $10,000 to $15,000 a year in a strategy that's going to keep up with inflation, it's certainly a good alternative to keeping an emergency account in a savings account. Because I mean, when's the last time you saw a savings account, paying anything at all?
Yeah, anything.
So I mean, if you know that this is backed by the government, it's highly liquid, easily accessible money after the first year, certainly a good option. And I think the interesting thing talking about I bonds and just, Google and the hot topics and all the stuff that comes out there. This is it's a good investment for the right person that understands it and sits down and takes the time to understand that it's a zero interest rate. So if inflation goes to zero, this will not pay any interest at all. It'll be like your savings account then.
It'll be just like your savings account or any other account at the bank, probably.
Dan, I always love that he brings these topics out because this is kind of the hot topic. People are hearing a lot about these, but if you get the soundbite, it's simply that it's paying 7.12% interest right now. And you don't hear anything else about how it works, how you access it, what it's meant to do. And this is something that we're coming across pretty regularly in terms of like what other interesting investment mechanisms are out there that people are hearing a little bit about. One that I hear a lot is, stock options and how do they work? And, what are employee stock options and what should I do? And should I take the employee stock options or should I take the stock and what's the difference? And, I think it's just a great opportunity to talk about all the different things that are out there and how sitting down with somebody can help really educate you.
Yes, I agree.
Exactly.
And, this might be something you never heard of. Maybe you hear someone mention it and you're like, it's worth looking at. It might be a good gift, right? Because a lot of grandparents give, 10K gifts to, get married or something or whatever. Instead of giving cash, maybe, or instead of giving, a regular savings bond, which the interest rates are low, why not go even lower at 0%? No, give it the inflation. If you truly believe inflation's an issue, here's a solution. See, the show's all about coming up with solutions, Tony, instead of harping on the fact inflation,
Yeah. Well, and you know what? Exactly. And then what you were saying, Chris, is you got to work with a financial services professional, especially on things like the I bond. And you mentioned stock options. People always have questions about this. You don't want to try to go it alone or go with what your neighbor said or your brother-in-law said or the guy you work with, your buddies. You've got to talk to a financial services professional. And number one, you guys will sit down with our listeners and there's no charge for an initial consultation. And it's so important to get your ducks in a row with a professional.
Well, and I think the thing that you get out of that isn't just an education, but actually crunching numbers. Because as Dan said, it's one of the things that we love is doing the math and figuring out exactly what the consequences are. And using like the stock option example is, okay, if I take a stock option, how much does the market need to go up for it to be better off than taking just the regular company stock? That's a calculation that Dan and I'll sit down and do for people. With the I bonds, it's the same thing. Okay, inflation, here's where it's at. Here's what it averages. So here's what you can kind of expect long term if you do this. You know, it's things like that versus just the upfront snapshot of, well, right now what's happening versus the longer picture.
Right. Well, we got to wrap things up, guys. But before we go, how can our listeners set up that consultation, talk with you guys about this?
I think the easiest way is to give us a call. Just call the 888-508-5935 number, and we'll talk you through it. Speaking of math, Tony, and that formula, I'm not going to put it back up. But I will say one of the things that I have to deal with is my kids doing that algebraic formula. So let's bring them in to say, hey, we don't work for the U.S. government. We're not saying the Treasury bond is right for you, but it might be. There's only one way to find out. Give us a call.
All matters discussed in today's show are for informational purposes only.
This show is not investment advice.
Dan Riddle nor Dolphin Financial Group are affiliated or endorsed by any government agency.
Investment advisory services are offered through Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc., a registered investment advisor in the state of Florida.
Insurance products and services are offered through Dolphin Insurance, Inc.
Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc. and Dolphin Insurance, Inc. are affiliated companies doing businesses as Dolphin Financial Group.
You should talk to someone at Dolphin Financial Group before implementing any of these strategies or ideas.